Welcome, Giant Slayers family. Thank you for joining us today. I am super excited. I have my friend, co-host for today, Reverend Tisha Dixon-Williams. She is a mighty, great woman of God, woman of many talents. And I just want to highlight some of her talents and her abilities, her ministries. She is the creator and chief curator of global women's ministry movement called Who's That Lady. She is the first, I like to emphasize that, female pastor of the Bridgehampton Baptist Church. She can correct me, but this is the first time in 97 years of this church history that they have a female preacher pastor. She's just a powerhouse world traveler. She's a wife. She's just a woman who is on the front line doing some amazing things. And if you're not following her after today's podcast, you need to go follow her immediately because you just want to know wherever Tisha is, that's where you want to be. I hope it's okay if I just call you Tisha because you're my girl
Yeah,
too.
you can call me Tish. That's even
Okay.
better.
Okay. Um, I just think she's doing some amazing things, and I just wanted to invite her today because I know that she would have so many nuggets for you to hear and for us to learn from. Whenever we do these interviews or have a co-host, it is to learn, it is to glean, it is to grow. That's what we're here to do in 2022. We're growing, we're pivoting, we're doing some great things. So welcome, Tish.
Thank you so much. Thank you to my sister Ashley. Thank you so much, Reverend Ramsey, Minister
Oh no,
Ramsey,
it's
Prophetess
Ashley.
Ramsey. Thank you so much for having me. I'm always humbled by any invitation I get, and I'm certainly humbled to be now counted in the Giant Slayer family. This is so amazing. So I'm so excited. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. And we have already had a good conversation before this, and we
Yes.
just had to catch up. But
Right.
I wanted to just highlight the fact that you are the first female pastor of this church, this amazing church. And when I met you 6 years ago, we were all at a conference, a leadership conference at Princeton,
Mhm.
and we kind of meshed immediately. We hung out, we spent time together, we sang songs. We just really had an amazing time getting to know one another. At that time, I don't think you were a pastor yet. I think you had accepted the call.
Yes.
I believe that you knew you were preaching as well,
Mhm.
and you knew that God was calling you to be a preacher. But I think this opportunity came some years later. Can you talk a little bit about your journey to being the pastor of this great church?
Yeah, so it's a rather unique journey. You're right. When we were together at BTLI in July, right? June, July of 2016, I had no idea. I was preaching at that time. I'm trying to think if I had even think I yeah, I think I was a I don't even think I was ordained yet. I think I may have gotten ordained. Oh, I got ordained in 2017, I want to say. So I wasn't even ordained yet. So this and being a pastor was never on my radar. I pastored the First Baptist Church of Bridgehampton, and my husband and I have a home here, a family home that he grew up in. And so we would spend summers out here. And his mom at the time would spend her winters in Florida, and then she would come up here to the area, quote unquote, known as the Hamptons for the summer. And so I literally was there for the weekend, just kind of getting her room together, getting the house together for her summer stay. And something that morning just said, I feel like worshiping today because I wasn't going to be at my church because I was away. And I said, I know I'm going to go to that little church on the turnpike with the steeple. I didn't know the name of the church. I just knew in my brain where the church was. I had visited a couple of times for different events because it was a well-known church out here. And I go in and I look at the program, and I'm like, okay, well, I know they're going to do a welcome. And as a good Baptist good Baptist, I know I have to respond to the welcome. I have to do my whole giving honor to God. So who do I address as the pastor? And they didn't have one. and understanding just sort of the pressure that a church must be under in the absence of a pastor. I could not be an able-bodied clergy person and not offer my support. And so I have never done this before and had never done it since. I went to the reverend who was here at the time, and I gave him my card and said, I'm here often. If you ever need help serving the ordinances or teaching with classes, I can make myself available. Never offered to preach, just to support. A week later, I think they called me and said, would you preach for us in September? This might have been July. I was like, sure. And then they just kept inviting me back consistently to come preach when they needed someone. In addition to other people. And then finally, they started a search committee and asked me if I would throw my hat in the ring. And I said, absolutely. And here we are now, going on 4 years later. It'll be 4 years in April that I was elected as the pastor of the First Baptist Church of Bridgehampton. Mhm.
Wow. Congratulations. I
Thank
mean, that's
you.
a huge accomplishment. And it's just, I just think, God just orders our steps so amazingly. Like,
Sure,
you know,
sure.
just, going into a church service and then lending your support, which just shows that you are a servant at heart. And then this opportunity coming, when they begin to do the search, it's just amazing.
Mhm.
And you are anointed and amazing, and you
Thank
always have a
you.
on time word,
To God be the glory. Thank
timely
you.
word. If you've not heard her preach, you need to go to YouTube and like listen to her words. They're profound.
Thank you.
And it's just great to hear you and to be able to hear you on a consistent basis. Your church is blessed. First Baptist Church of Bridgehampton, they're blessed.
Thank
Um,
you. To God be the glory.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And so I wanted to kind of gauge from you. I know that you have this experience of, pastoring now 4 years during a pandemic, right?
Child. Mm.
You have a lot of hats, and you know, we've had to, you're also an author.
Yes.
So we've all had to learn how to pivot during this time. And last episode, we talked a little bit about that mindset, shift that we've had to make that adjustment, with the pandemic and, you know, some of the goals we had set before, we've had to look at those goals a little bit differently. We've had to shift in our mind. We had to shift in our thinking as a church,
Mhm.
as a mother, as a wife, whatever roles we play in life, like we've had to make that adjustment and that shift because the world is just not what it was 2 or 3 years
Mhm.
ago.
Mhm.
And so, can you share some ways in which you've had to pivot and anything, any words of wisdom that you can give to those who are listening regarding pivoting?
Sure. So the interesting thing about pivots, right, is that they're different types of pivots. So if you look at a ballerina, when a ballerina pivots, right, they call it a pirouette. And it's the most amazing, beautiful. I think if you go to the ballet, you're waiting for her to do this phenomenal twirl, this pirouette. And in actuality, she's pivoting. What people don't understand about that pivot is it looks really easy, but it's quite difficult. And then there's the basketball pivot. The basketball pivot that says I have to keep one foot on the ground while the other one is moving. Otherwise, I'll get fouled, right? And so the idea that in this season, we've had to do a little bit of that, keep one foot in and one foot out while still protecting that which is important to us, keeping our hands on the ball. And then the pivot I think that I have benefited from the most and was the most unexpected is what I've been calling the providential pivot. So while we are yet pivoting like a pirouette, where I have done things that have looked really easy, that have been very difficult to do, and also have done my best to keep my eye on the ball, to keep one foot into what we used to do and one foot into now where we have to go. That sort of hybrid ministry. And then the providential period is providential pivot, say that 3 times fast, is God. the pivot that God makes that you don't even see coming. And I say that because right before COVID hit, one of my main goals going into my so let me say this, pastoring in a pandemic. I had only been pastoring for a year and a half. So in my third year, that last year and a half, I have been pastoring in a pandemic, which is crazy to me. So I'm like, I'm just trying to figure out where the bathrooms are. I just I'm still trying to learn everyone's names. And now God, you dropped
Yes.
this on me. What part of the game is this? And so
Mhm.
right before COVID hit, one of my plans was to upgrade the whole digital system so that at some point we would be able to go virtual, so that we would be able to have online worship. The whole project was finished in March. March 15th was the last day we had in-person service. We were
Wow.
able to go live and stream March 22nd. Our first live service, we had over 3,000 views.
Wow.
3,000 people tuned in on our first day. And I was like, that was only God. Only God. So I talk about the providential pivot, the pivot that God, the move that God makes that we are not even aware of. And that's why it's so important to be obedient to the voice of God and to the spirit of God, because that's how you win. And you get all sorts of pushback like, why do we need all these monitors? And why do we need this? And why do we need that? And the fact of the matter was because God knew we would need it. And so,
Right.
just as a leader, being responsive to what God was saying, like, you don't know why you need this, but I do, because there's a storm a brewing.
Right. Something's on the way.
Something is on the horizon and I need you to be prepared for it. So when we talk about pivots, there are different types, but that providential pivot, the pivot that God where God knows it before you even know it. And when you're obedient to the spirit and you follow God's lead, you can put things in place that will protect you in seasons of turmoil, really. Because that's what it's been. That's what it's been. But we all have to be ready to pivot. I always tell people, get your shift together.
Come
You know,
on.
get your shift together. You
That's
always have to
right.
be ready to shift. And here's the great thing about a shift: anything that you shift is a small move that makes a big impact. If I
Wow.
shift the gear in my car, it's a small move, it's a tap of the gear shift handle, but my whole car moves as a result. If you hit shift on a keyboard, it has the potential to change everything that you've typed on your desktop. So when anything that we shift makes a huge difference, a small move making a big impact. So I always tell people, look for the small moves, look for the small windows. We always want the home run, but baseball games are won by covering your bases. You could sit at a baseball game for 100 hours and never see a home run, but you will see people cover the bases. And that's what a shift is all about. It's always keeping your eye open for the next great move.
Absolutely. And something you said that was so profound, when you talked about that providential pivot. I always talk about how when you break that word down, meaning before and video meaning seeing. So seeing before,
That's
literally,
it.
God has the ability to show us things before they happen.
That's it.
And he's so great like that, right? He warns us.
Mhm,
He will tell us to
mhm,
go down a certain path, a certain
mhm,
direction, because he knows what's ahead of us. But we also have to know how to listen to the voice of the Spirit to really know what he's telling us to do. And I
mhm,
know that there may be some who may say, you know what? This is a season where I need to hear that voice. I need to hear what God is really saying to me regarding the shift, the small moves that make big impacts. I need
mhm.
to know what God is really speaking to me. And, if you can give some wisdom or some words on how do we really get in tune with that voice to hear when we really need a shift, when we need to move into the direction where God is leading us into? What do we need to do to kind of make that shift? And how do we know when that providential pivot is happening for us?
Mhm. I think the first thing that you have to do is understand that God may not speak audibly. We're
Mm,
always looking for a a moment for God to speak and actually speak and say something. But I think it was Dr. Renita Weems who said God hadn't spoken since the last time God spoke. So it's like you hear that you're sitting here waiting for a voice that's not going to come. But rather
Mhm.
that voice comes in the form of people,
Right.
the voice comes in the form of a song. You might
Mhm.
hear something and that's God's voice. It comes through a feeling, and we ought not ignore some of the things that we feel, like our gut. I don't know that our gut steers us wrong. Our mind, our heart sometimes, but I don't know that the gut fails. And you know it when it's God. And then the other thing I say is take the step. That's really how you know. When you
Mhm.
take the step and it works, and it looks
Mhm.
like there's another step to take, more often than not, that's God. If
Mhm.
there are no feelings of confusion or chaos surrounding it, more often than not, that's God. Because here's what I know about God: God will never tell you to do anything to hurt yourself or anybody else. That's how you know when it's the voice of God. And then you have to understand God's will. So I know some people struggle. I'm going to use this one. I don't know if sometimes I want to tell people about God. Sometimes I want to tell people about the goodness of Jesus. So I feel compelled to pray for somebody, but I'm so scared because I don't know if it's really God telling me to do that. Let me ask you this question. Why wouldn't God want you to pray for somebody?
Right.
Is that not in the will of God that we pray for one another? Right?
Right.
Why would God not want you to go feed somebody? Why would God not want you to volunteer at the homeless shelter and feed people when we are specifically ordered to do what? Feed my sheep. What you do
Mhm.
to the least of these, you have done unto me. So you have to understand the will of God in order to understand the voice of God. Why wouldn't God want you to sing a song in God's honor? Why wouldn't God want you to use your talents and multiply them to be a blessing to other people? So I think we hear God through other people, through song, through different avenues. I think we hear God through our experiences and in our gut. And I think we hear God by just starting. If you have an inclination to do it and watch God do the rest. I am a firm believer in that, and I'm a living witness to that. That's how kind of how Who's That Lady was born. I I knew there was something I was supposed to be doing around women. And I had this whole other thought and idea for it. But I kept feeling very anxious and nervous in my spirit. And I was like, this can't be of God because I don't have any peace about this. While I'm trying to do the right thing, I don't have any peace about this. So I stopped what I was doing. It was a morning before I went to work. I got on my knees and I prayed. Not 10 minutes after I got up, I got a call from a woman in my church. I had never heard from her before, had never heard from her after. She never called me. Can't even tell you how she got my number. And she just said, I'm going into surgery today. They found cancer, and I'd really like you to pray with me. And I prayed with her. It was after that prayer that I said, I got it, Lord, loud and clear, that I knew I was being called to be a blessing to support women in their struggles, and to that for them to know without a shadow of a doubt that they were not alone, and that no matter what they were going through, it wouldn't be the first time that God showed up in a very similar situation. And that's how Who's That Lady was born. And so when I say that, I mean, take the step. You know what I mean? Take the step. That's how it all happened. It was just, and then after that, it was crystal clear. And so once I took the step to start Who's That Lady, all of a sudden, I didn't have to say anything. Someone came to me and said, I really want to support you in this. So when we do Bible study, can I set up the camera and we can go on social media? Somebody else said, you're going to have a lot on your plate with this endeavor. Can I assist you? I want to support you in this. I promise you. And now that same person, my friend Cerny Bryan, she now has her own ministry where she helps
Wow.
incarcerate and helps the incarcerated with reentry. Because of all the work that she did with me, she was able to learn, and then she was inspired to do her own thing. That's God. You can't tell me that God. Every spiral, and then it became a worldwide movement. Then it became 300 women in Uganda. Then it became a school in Kenya. Now it's a retreats to Morocco. That's all
Wow.
God. All because when I got up off my knees, I said, Lord, whatever your will is, I'll do. That was it. So sometimes it's just about taking the step. It's just about taking the one step, and God will bring all the resources and put everything into place. Of that, I am sure.
Hmm. It's about trusting God, even when you don't see all of the steps. Like you talked about taking the step. So
That's
you
it.
may not see the full staircase, but once you take that step, things will start to align
That's it.
itself and God will show you the rest of the
That's
way.
it.
And, that's what this whole walk is about, faith, trusting
Mhm.
God, even when we don't see
That's right.
everything He is doing. We can trust
Mhm.
His ability to, number one, take care of us because He loves us.
That's
And
right.
He's never going to do anything, as you've already said, to hurt us or to harm us. He's going to tell us
Mhm.
what's going to help us grow and develop as individuals, as people, that's going to support other people.
Mhm.
God has it all figured out. And
Right.
so if we take
Right.
that step, it's risky,
It's
right?
totally risky. Mhm.
Yeah, because when you are obedient, it's all about trusting God. It's
Mhm.
risky. You don't know what's going to happen next, but it's about having the faith to say, God, if you lead me to it, I know that you're going to guide me through everything that comes along with
That's
it.
right. Let me tell you,
You're going
that
to
is
help
yeah.
me with it.
That is actually my deal, God and I's deal. We have an agreement.
Wow.
And when I noticed that ministry was starting to shift, when things were starting to become, um, were growing in a way that I had not expected and was shifting in ways that I did not expect, I started to become very fearful. And if there's one emotion, it's two emotions I don't like: fear and regret. I hate them. And fear is not a detractor for me. Fear motivates me. It pushes me because now I feel like I have something I have to prove to myself beyond the fear. And I became very fearful of ministry. And I was like, whoa, this is moving this is too much too soon. I don't know what you're doing, but pump the brakes. And then I was like, wait a minute. That is not even how I've lived my life. That is never Being afraid has never served me well. Right? I feel the fear and do it anyway. And people are always like, well, aren't you I'm scared all the time. I'm scared all the time, but I do it anyway. I do it scared. And so for the first time, almost willingly recoiling and pulling myself back from what God had for me, that felt worse than the fear itself because I
Mm,
wasn't operating in the power that God gave me to operate in. And I said, okay, God, so here's the deal. I guess I see what you're doing. It doesn't look like you're taking your foot off the gas. So
mm-mm.
how do we work this thing out? Here's the deal. I said, here's what I'm willing to do. If you open the door, I promise you, God, that I will always have the courage to walk through it. Now, understand what I said. I never said that once I get on the other side, I'm going to take my own path. I said, if you open the door, I will walk through it and then I'm going to leave the rest up to you. The problem with that we have most times is we want to walk through the door and navigate the path. That
Come
ain't your
on.
job.
Right.
Your job is to walk through the door and then
Mm,
let God navigate the path. Let God map that thing out, not you. Let God do it. Your job is to take the step, cross the threshold. And for some of us, that's a huge step. As you said, that's risky because they who raise their head above the crowd gets all the tomatoes.
mm.
That's risky. It's risky to stand out. It's risky to be a trailblazer. It's risky to be a path paver. It's risky. You put yourself out there. You got the court of public opinion. You have your own insecurities it is risky. Ain't no lie. But all God is saying in this season is just cross the threshold. One of my favorite stories in the Bible is Caleb and Joshua when they're sent to spy out the land. I absolutely love that because he's like, just take a peek into what I had. He didn't say go in, he had them go in and do recon. Some of us have to understand that right now in this season, you're ripe for recon. God is sending you just to scout out a little bit of what I have for you. And how many times have we prayed that prayer? Lord, if you could just show me. If you could just show me a little peek into the future. And then when God does, we pull back. It's like, wait a minute. Nope, that was too scary. But how amazing is it that every once in a while, God allows you to be an active participant in the future that God has for you? And those moments don't happen often, but when they do, you got to walk through the door. When God opens the door and says, let me give you a spoiler alert. You got to take it. You got to take it. And all you're required to do is take the step. God will do the rest. But again, we get so overwhelmed with the fact that we have to have the plan. We have to have the path. We got to know what's next. I don't want to know what's next. I don't know I don't want to navigate that for me all the time. I like it. It
Right,
turns out so much better when God does it.
right, right.
It turns
And
out
you,
so much better.
there's so much joy in just relying on God. Because when you feel like, oh, I gotta know everything, I gotta be a part of everything, that's when anxiety creeps in, that's when fear
Absolutely.
creeps in, that's when worry comes in and tries to rob you of the peace and the joy that you can
Yes.
have in a moment. Where if you just rely on God, and it's easier said than done. God knows
Right.
I've had my moments where I've been like, biting my nails, like, Lord, I don't know how to get through this,
Uh-huh.
but he always comes through. And so
Yeah.
now that I know that God has a consistent track record with me, his
Mhm.
track record says that no matter what you go through, I got you. I got your
Listen.
back. I'm coming
Listen.
through for you.
We
So
got receipts. That's the thing.
because because of his track record, I can have full confidence in the plan that he's laid out for me.
Yes. That's what always say. That's why I love, like, say, I know David is a controversial biblical person. I
I
know this
love it
biblical
though.
person, but let me tell you why I love David. I love David because David was never afraid to produce receipts. But also, it's just what you said. I say that all the time. David understood and knew and stood firm in his track record with God. He was clear God has never failed me. The reason why David could so confidently stand against Goliath, he said it. He said, because my God has already kept me from these other animals as I kept watch the lion and the bear. God has already kept me. So this is light stuff for me. I have a track record from God. How many times did I have to rip a U from the mouth of a beast? This is light stuff for me. I can handle this not because of who I am, but because of who God is. I got receipts. Period. And when God, and that's the thing, like that's relationship. That is the beauty of relationship with God beyond religion. And I'm a pastor. Church has its place, but it's the religion. I love when I see people grow in their relationship with God, where they know for themselves, I've got a track record. And here's the beauty of a track record. My track record ain't your track record.
Mm.
The way that God has set things up for Ashley is not the way God has set things up for Tish. And when I try to make my things set up like Ashley, that's when I fail. Because I ain't Ashley. Ashley ain't Tish. It just doesn't work that way. But I know enough about God and have experienced enough with God to know that God always comes through, even when God don't come through the way that I want God to. Which thank God for that. Because my plan was weak at best. It was faulty at best. And the thing we also have to consider when we talk about how God moves in our lives is God does not play checkers, God plays chess.
Come
God
on.
is always moves and minutes and moments and months and years and generations ahead. And so what God does in this moment will echo in eternity. So we can't miss that. We can't do that. Only God can do that. And so I love that God is a God of exponential blessings, that the blessing that I have is directly attached to how God may want to bless Ashley. So God will bless me and move me out the way because guess what? It's time for Ashley to come in or somebody else. And so maybe you're frustrated today because you're wondering about why the years are passing and you think that time is being wasted. It's not that time is not being wasted, but there's somebody who is an active participant in how God wants to bless you. And maybe that person is just not in position yet. God is working it out so that once they're in position, what do we know? It's all going to work out for good. Not just your good, but everybody else's good that's involved. And I think sometimes we're selfish in that vein. We just want it to work out for us. We're not considering about who else is going to be affected by how it works out for us. I hope that makes sense because I love that about God. I love that about God. That the
It,
very thing that I didn't even think was a thought was so critical to how God would even bless me, how God would favor me, and not even the good things, how God maybe had to move me out of the way, how God had to sit me down because this particular move ain't really about you. You're just a player in the providential plan. That's the
sis,
thing. We
you
all think that we're supposed to be the
good.
lead. We always think we're supposed to be the lead. Sis, sometimes you're the understudy.
Yes,
Ashley, get me off this podcast, child. Sometimes you're supposed to be backstage. Sometimes you're the
listen.
prop master. You are
Yes,
not. Sometimes you're not. Isn't that something that you have to come to a
yes.
realization that sometimes this ain't your show. You are not the
It ain't
star
about you,
in this
boo.
season. It ain't about you, boo. Maybe this season is not for you to have the starring role. Maybe you're the supporting actor or actress.
Wow.
And if you can do that well, then your time will come. I'm a firm believer
Mm-hmm,
in that. Can you cheer
mm-hmm,
louder than everybody else when somebody
mm-hmm.
else is winning? And I believe that determines how fast God moves on your behalf sometimes. I have learned to be content.
Mm.
I've
In whatever
learned
situation
in
I found
whatever
myself,
situation I find myself in, I have learned.
learn.
Sometimes it's not about you being center stage. Sometimes God is just calling you to open the curtain for somebody else that they might shine. It's as simple as that. And you got to know when you're in that position. I, yeah. I think that's what we have to learn too as believers. We got to learn how to cheer.
Oh, that's so good.
We got to
That's
learn
so
how to
good.
cheer. Mhm.
Yep, because everybody wants to be in the role of the, key part person or the key leader. But that second person that helps and puts things together and coordinates, they are valuable just as
That's
important.
it. Everybody can't
And
be on the field.
no,
Somebody has to cheer.
that's
I
right.
rem I remember we were doing this is at my former church. We were doing a training on street ministry and how to minister to people on the street. And the gentleman he was so good. He was such a good trainer. And the thing I always remember he said, "Listen, let me be clear. Everybody is not gifted to talk to people, to initiate conversation on the street. That's not everybody's ministry." He said, "And that's okay. It doesn't mean you can't be a part of the street ministry." He said, "Because somebody's got to make the Kool-Aid." He
Come
was
on.
saying somebody's got to have the refreshments ready when everybody comes off the street. And that role is just as important as the street team. The people who are behind the scenes making sure that the disciples are supported. He
Come
said, "Don't
on.
ever take that role for granted." And that's something that has stuck with me. And every once in a while, when I'm feeling away, I'm like, you know what? Somebody got to make the Kool-Aid.
That's right.
Somebody's got to make the Kool-Aid.
And it's okay. Like, humble yourself and do the role that you need to do. Like, understand your assignment. Understand the
I
assignment.
understand the assignment. Exactly.
Yes, you got to understand your purpose and your assignment. And,
Mhm.
just because somebody else is in the forefront doesn't mean that your assignment is any less valuable. Every part of the
No,
body matters.
that's
Every
it.
part that we, contribute to the church or to any community organization, we
Mhm.
are valuable to
That's
that
it.
organization, whatever God has called us to. And we have to understand that our role is important, no matter how great or small. It's valuable. It all
Mhm.
helps things go and keep things moving. And
Mhm.
we just have to be okay with where God is leading us and directing us and whatever, that is. We have to
Mhm.
be okay with that. And
That's right.
you're right. Your day will come. Like,
Your
there
day
will
will
be a
come.
time when someone's going to say, what, they're a servant. They have a good heart. Their
Right.
intentions motives up here? Because that's what we get hung up on is like, a lot of times when we're doing stuff, what are our motives behind doing it? Like, why are we doing
Mhm.
what we do?
Yes.
Are you taking pictures while you're evangelizing on the street so that people can say, oh, they're giving, they're giving food to the needy?
Mhm.
Like, why?
Mhm.
Why do you do what
Yeah.
you do? What's
Yeah.
the why behind what you're doing? What's the heart? What's the motive?
Mhm.
And that's why God said, I'm not looking at the outward appearance. I'm looking at the
Right.
heart, the
Sure.
intention,
Sure.
why you're
Sure.
offering what you're offering. Because it matters.
It
Your motives
matters.
matter, your intentions matter when we're doing what God has called us to do. It's all a
Mhm.
part of how He wants us to flow and how He wants us to operate. And then sometimes
Mhm.
God will have us in situations that will humble us so that He can
Mhm.
get the ultimate glory. Because at
Right.
the end of the
For
day, it's
sure.
not about our name being written or our names being called. It's about His name being glorified
That's right.
through whatever we're doing.
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's what matters at the end of the day.
Hmm.
That is what matters at the end of the day. And it's also about being in community. It's really about that's the way Jesus did. It really is about being in community and being supportive of one another. Um, and again, having the ability and the willingness to cheer. That when someone is doing well, that you are genuinely supportive of them, um, and loving to them and kind to them. And the idea that if you can't help somebody, at least don't hurt them.
Hmm.
You
That's
can't
good.
help, don't hurt. Yeah,
That's good.
because as you said, your day will come.
That's right.
And here's the deal. The question is, what are you doing while you're waiting? The misconception about that word waiting, wait is still a verb. To
Right.
wait is still an action word. And when
Hmm.
we say wait on the Lord, that's an active waiting. That's a waiting that says, while I'm waiting for my change to come, or while I'm waiting for my breakthrough, right? What am I doing so that when the wait is over, I'm prepared? So I'm talking to the associate out here who can't wait to get in the pulpit. But are you crafting your sermon? Are you taking the time, all of this time that you have to craft a really good sermon? Are you reading? I'm the person who was like, I'm waiting on this promotion. Are you taking the exams necessary so that you qualify for the promotion? To those, I'm waiting for the perfect relationship. Are you waiting? Are you working on yourself so that you might be your best self should the opportunity arise for a relationship? What are you doing while you're waiting? There's work to be done while you're waiting. So when we say we're waiting, that's not a passive waiting. There's something that should be happening. There's work for you to do in that so that when it comes, you don't even miss it. It's that providential, right? It's like almost what I said about we were ready when COVID hit because we had put so many things in place. When the opportunity came, we were able to go live that very next week and haven't missed a beat since. And that's what you do while you wait. You work while you wait. It's an active waiting.
Mm. That is so good. I'm taking so many notes, and I hope our listeners are
I hope
gleaning
I'm
from this.
helping.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yes, you are. I was saying, to my father who was preaching, I said he is opening my mail. He's reading my mail. And then you're doing the same thing. You're reading all my mail. I'm like, this is
Uh-oh.
good.
Uh-oh.
I could take this and just meditate on it for a couple of
Yeah.
days and see,
Yeah.
because you're right. How well are you waiting? We're all waiting on the Lord for something. We're
I
trusting
like
God
that. You got to
for
wait
something.
well. Hmm.
Yes, but how
Hmm.
well are you waiting? Are you
Hmm.
frustrated? Are you complaining? Are you agitated? Are you, down about it? How
Yeah.
well are you waiting? Are you waiting with hope and anticipation, hoping against hope and trusting and believing in God by faith?
Right.
Like,
You're
how
right.
well are you waiting in this season? And
Hmm.
that's powerful. And I believe, God would want us to wait, trusting in Him and just
Yeah.
hopeful and having joy and peace that
Hmm.
despite what we see, because that's how we get
Hmm.
hung up, is when we see things and it's not in place.
Right.
I always say the pieces are coming together, you just don't see it yet.
Just don't see it.
God
Right.
is, yes, God is in the background, putting the story together. And we just have to trust that, his process may not be our process. His
Correct.
thoughts are not the way we think about it.
Correct.
But it is perfecting his will, and it's going to allow us to see in the end, like, oh, that's what he was doing the whole time.
The
I didn't see it in the
whole
moment.
time. It's the aha. I recently
Mhm.
preached about that. I preached a sermon titled From Oops to Aha, how we can learn from our mistakes, how our greatest mistakes become an aha moment. And the thing that I learned from Oprah about the aha moment, the phrase that she coined, is that you can't have an aha if you didn't already know it. And aha is not new information. And aha is information that has been inside. And it isn't until somebody says something or something happens that that information now becomes back in the forefront. And so a aha is not a revelation, but rather it's a resonation of what you
Mm,
already knew.
so good.
And so that's what happens in these moments. We have to look for our aha, this awakening, like, you know what? The Lord, I had prayed that prayer 10 years. Now here we go, right? It's like, oh, I just had an aha moment. I always knew. I always knew this was a possibility for my life. I always felt that God would come through this way. And now here it is. And I love that the way God, again, when God does it, it comes out so much better than we could have ever have imagined, so much better than we could have. I could not have written my story any better. The idea that I just said, "Oh, I feel like going to church today," and that I would then 4 years later become the pastor of the church I just felt like going to today. And I couldn't have written it better myself. I really couldn't have. God is amazing. And as you said, it's really about trusting God. And if I can also submit this, waiting is difficult. Even active waiting well is even more difficult. And when that happens, and when we have, God does not mind us being frustrated. I am not of the mind that God has a problem with our frustration or our anger, even our anger toward God. I don't believe, because of the relationship. What child does not get annoyed at their parent when they don't get what they want, or when they're
Right.
confused, or when they don't have information? I do not believe that the God who loves us, who is quite patient with us, who understands anger because God gave us the anger emotion, is angry with is angry with us if we get angry with God, right? I don't believe that. But I think it's how we handle it. And you mentioned something. I think that we can be frustrated and we can air our complaints, but I think God would prefer us to give it to God. Here's the deal. God can handle it. Whatever we
Mm.
have that's in us that makes us angry or frustrated, don't you know you can't say anything that's going to hurt God's feelings? Meaning, God can handle it. God is God. Your friends can't always handle it. Your parents can't always handle it, but God can handle it. So you are, I think we are well within our rights to say, God, this is real messed up. You got to help me with this one because I don't understand it. And the reason I say that's okay is because the prophets did it. Jeremiah wrote a whole book about it called Lamentations. One big complaint about how he was really thought his life was really sucky at that time. And I think we have to learn how to lament and give it to God and say, God, I'm really mad about this. I don't understand why you're doing this. I had that conversation with God in the pandemic. Why would you bring me to this place only for a year and a half later to have me pastor in a pandemic? And then I call my mentor, my God dad, who's been doing this for 40 plus years. And I'm like, what do I do? And he just said, daughter, I do not know. And I was like, wait a minute now, because if you don't know, who do? Right? If the most seasoned, experienced pastor that who does if you don't know? And then it became this extreme frustration with God. Like, why would you do this to me now? Like,
Mm.
you could have waited till I was at least in this thing a little longer, but you do this to me now. And then I had to reframe it. And I changed my whole, this was a pivot. I begin to realize, as we said, that things have to be in a certain place in a certain order. That's the way God works, right? We don't always understand what God is doing. We don't always understand the order. But I said, wait a minute. What was it about this particular group of leaders, whether that be clergy or otherwise? Let's say for now, clergy. What was it about this particular group of leaders that were in place that maybe God felt like they could handle it in a pandemic? And then I kind of reframed it and I was like, it's not that God did this to me, but God said, no, you're here for such a time as this because you can handle it. I'm going to help you handle it. And so once I began to reframe that, I was like, wow, what a privilege that I am now officially one of the keepers of the story for 2020. That we could write a whole new gospel on what has happened between 2020 and now. And what an honor and blessing and privilege that I'm one of the keepers of that story. That 50 years from now, 100 years from now, somebody will watch a sermon that you preached. They'll read a sermon that I wrote. They'll read my book. They'll hear a podcast and say, wow, that's what was happening 50 years ago. How amazing is that? So yes, it's painful. And I would not want this ever again. And with every season,
No, thank
there's
you.
just a new level of it, right? No, thank you. But I can't help but to feel some level of joy and humility, actually, that God would say, yeah, but you get to tell this forever and ever. You get to tell this story. And that maybe in telling the story, you'll help some other pastor or preacher survive or get through it because you were able to tell the story about how y'all lived through it. And so I count it as a privilege. Painful, sure, but it's still a privilege. Yeah, yeah.
That's so good. That's
Mhm.
powerful. But it's like when you get to the other side, you can look back and say, "Oh, okay, Lord, I see what you were doing there."
Right,
That
right. It's
was
like I see what you did there. Mhm.
yeah, that
Mhm.
was good. Can you, right, we're getting ready to close, but can you share a little bit about your book, I See You, Sis, Inspirations from Heroic Woman of the Bible Hidden in Plain Sight? Can you
Yes.
share just a little bit about the book so that we can, number one, we want to know where to purchase it. And
Yes.
then, tell us a little bit about what we'll be getting from the book.
Sure. So the book is basically a compilation of my sermons and teachings on women in the Bible that derive from Who's That Lady, and that's how Who's That Lady was born. Who's That Lady was really started as a women's Bible study on the lesser known women of the Bible. So Who's That Lady, and that's really what you'll get in I See You, Sis. It's all about what I just said. It's women coming out of hiding. It's women who have been hidden in plain sight and just the active roles that they have played in their particular narratives and how their stories so closely resemble our stories today. And really, that if God did it for them, God will do it for us too. And so that's I See You, Sis, and just this whole idea of I see you. When you say I see you, it means so much more than just vision or ocular. When I see you, it's the idea that I feel you. It's the idea that I see you and now I feel a level of accountability to help you fix your situation, that I'm now accountable to you. And so, yeah, that's what you'll get in the book. Inspirational stories of women in the Bible with wonderful, thoughtful questions. And yeah, it's I'm so happy about it. I love
Yeah, it's
it.
powerful, and I've heard many of your sermons and
Yes.
some of your Bible studies, and I know that this is a great resource for
Thank
women in particular, but just anyone who really wants to learn up on different women in the Bible and history. And I love the title "I See You, Sis" because
you.
there's so many women out there who do not feel seen,
That's
who do
it.
not, and there's a lot of women in the Bible who don't even have names, right?
Nope.
But we recognize that you're valuable, men and women who are listening today. You're valuable, you are important to
Yes.
God, and we see
Yes.
you.
We
We
see
see
you
you.
for
You're
sure.
called, anointed, you're ordained. We see you. So
That's it. We see you.
I want to thank you, Tish,
Thank
for
you.
taking this time out to talk to us, to share with us. I know my audience is blessed, and we have enough footage for two
Yay!
podcast episodes. I'm just so excited to replay this for everyone. And please, for those of you who are listening, please comment on Apple, review us, let us know that you're listening, that you enjoyed this. And I definitely want to encourage you guys to email us at Slay the Giant podcast at gmail.com if you have any comments or if you want to just reach out and just share your feedback on what happened today. But this is powerful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And to close out, can you tell us where can we reach you? I know how to reach you, but
Sure.
where can they reach you on social media or whether
Sure.
your website or what have you? Where can we keep in contact with your ministry and follow you?
Sure. So the book can be purchased on Amazon. You heard the title, I See You, Sis, Inspirations from Heroic Women of the Bible Hidden in Plain Sight. So that's available on Amazon. You can also find me on my website, who's that lady men.com, and I'm also on Facebook. You can go to Who's That Lady on Demand. It is a group. Please join the group. And also you can find me on IG at Who's That Dot Lady. And you can look for
Awesome.
my head silhouette. It looks just like that. The logo looks just like my head. And so, yep, that's where you can find me. And I just want to say thank you so much, Ashley, for the privilege and the honor of being on this platform. It is, first of all, it's a joy to know you, and it's a joy to just see you in ministry. You are such a powerhouse and such a blessing to so many. I thank God for you, and I pray for God's richest blessings in your ministry. The door is open to you, sis. The door is open to you. So
Amen. I
God
receive
bless you.
that. Thank
Hmm.
you so much. And to our audience, God bless you guys. And until next time, slay those giants and conquer your fears. Bye.